This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome to the Elevate Construction Podcast, where we cover multiple concepts and capture the complexity of implementation. We don't just have one or two tricks, we have the whole show. My name is Jason Schroeder, and today's podcast is about segmenting your forces. This is the 7th podcast in the first war series. We hope you're enjoying these concepts and these podcasts and are thinking about ways to implement them on your projects. So what is the strategy behind these podcasts? How does sharing these podcasts help you? Well, the hope is that all of our trade partners, our contractors, our workers, our foremen, our superintendents, everybody in the construction industry will be better educated on how to perform in their role, that will have better, more remarkable environments. And so I would say it's pretty easy to share a podcast, to let somebody know about certain information, to recommend a book, to recommend some of these books that you've been reading along with me in these podcasts. I think it would be absolutely remarkable. That's how it benefits you, is that we should all change this industry together and have more remarkable working environments and not be so frustrated that people aren't getting it, that they don't have the right education, that people aren't helping them, and then they're struggling on project sites. So why would you want to listen today? Do you want a way to lead more progressive organizations? Do you want the license to enable people and teams but just don't know how to do it? Do you want to win against any of your difficult situations? Well, if you do, then you'll want today's podcast. We have a great concept and we have a great podcast, great content today. Again, the topic is segment your forces. So let me tell you a couple of stories, and then I'll give you a story that I've heard in the 33 Strategies of War. Again, wonderful, wonderful book. I love that book and the stories and concepts in that book. The two stories that I want to tell you about, they're really brief, but it talks to having multiple options. We always talk in these podcasts about having plan A, B, C, D, E, or F, and being nimble like Napoleon was. This is a really good concept. So let me tell you about just two of them that I thought were pretty interesting. Both of them actually on the same project. I've seen this play out over and over and over in my career, though. These are just two of my favorite. Now, we all know any experienced deck superintendent, deck foreman, or craftsperson, or superintendent that's dealt with concrete knows that you really want to have your slab on grade before you form your decks. That if you put your deck formwork, your shores on mudsills and, a rat slab, or maybe just some base, that there is a tendency for the decks to deflect and for it to be an absolute nightmare to put up the formwork in the first place, but then to strip it and to mobilize around. You don't have a really firm foundation upon which to run around with, mobile scissor lifts, and it's just a difficult situation. And so everybody knows that, everybody says that, but in certain situations, I in the past have considered, if this building starts to get a little bit behind schedule, we might need to bypass the slab on grade. And this has happened to me on actually 3 projects, and 2 of the projects we implemented it, 1 we didn't. So in this example, what I'll tell you is that we were finishing a very high and complex basement that was next to 2 other buildings, adjacent to 2 other buildings, and we were finishing that basement work and really doing a meticulous job in getting up to the level 1 decks. There was another portion of the building that had slab on grade, and because of the schedule constraints and the need to get everything else started going up through the superstructure and to finish that concrete on time, there was an option, a plan B, may have even been a plan C, to abandon the slab on grade, to bypass it, and to form the decks over the top. Because of schedule constraints at the time, we had everything planned to where we could either place the slab on grade and drive through it, or we could bypass it. And immediately at that moment, we bypassed the slab on grade. And like I said, in other examples, in other podcasts, we met the concrete schedule within 4 hours of the original target. And I was very, very proud of that. And the entire team was, and it set the rest of the job up to finish perfectly on time. We did a remarkable job. The concrete contractor did a remarkable job, and we were all set and ready to go. But we wouldn't have been able to do it if we didn't have the option with the longer shores, with the mudsills, with the AB to go do that. We would have been stuck with our current planning. So we were able to implement that. There was another project where I said, hey, you need to be ready to do slab on grade. You also need to have plan B in case you need to bypass it. You need to really think about whether or not this is going to pan out and whether or not you should switch to your plan B or plan C. And they ignored me, and I'm not pouting and I'm not whining, but they ignored me, and that slab on grade pushed them past because of the underground MEP taking too long. It pushed them behind schedule by 6 weeks. They never recovered it, and they were 6 weeks behind in delivering the building. And then take another example where I was a director over a project where we had that same option. Hey, we need to plan on putting the slab on grade in, but we need to have a contingency plan in case we need to bypass it. In that case, we needed to bypass it. We did so. We had all of the right size props. We had mudsills. We had everything ready to go. We were able to do it where the decks didn't have any deflection, and it turned out with really good high quality work, and we were able to meet schedule, and that project was on schedule, and it really did a really nice, good job. And so my point there is, we have to have these different options. And in that middle story where the superintendent wasn't willing to consider these other options and was just stuck with the same old plan that they've always had, it didn't work out. We have to be able to be nimble. We have to be willing to think of other things. And here's another story. On a superstructure that we did, there was a long span central section of mild reinforced concrete decks with some very large beams that basically spanned like a bridge over an areaway. And those big beams is what supported that deck area. And this decking and this high bay forming, it had to be laced. It was a special type of formwork. The beams were super deep, so you had beam edges before the top of the deck could be formed. It was just taking forever. It was basically like forming a bridge. And the original sequence was ABC, ABC, ABC. Each were 10,000 square feet. And we went from one side of the building to the other. We realized that this wasn't sustainable. So we implemented Plan B, which was to split that long span in half lengthwise, not in the middle, side to side, meaning from section A all the way to section C, the joint would run right down the middle in a north-south direction instead of east-west where the construction joints, the placement breaks were typically. And this wasn't something that people thought that you could do, but we had been exploring plan A, B, C, D, E, and F, and we explored that with the structural engineer, and it turns out we were able to split that deck lengthwise. And what that allowed us to do was to place one side of that, the large beams and the deck with the camber, and to start forming some critical columns and walls along that side, which were on the critical path, while we were continuing the decking and getting the other side ready, and we were able to make up the schedule. And the point there is that most teams wouldn't start to look at options like that and have a plan A, B, C, D, E, or F in their pockets. And we absolutely have to be able to do that if we're going to make schedule. Now, here's a couple other little stories based on smaller, more nimble units. On that same project, which I'm talking about, we had basically a large project with 380 workers. It was very complex, very massive, different areas. And instead of having one huddle, which some projects do, we broke up that project into 3 functional huddle systems with foreman huddles and worker huddles in the morning by superintendent. And by breaking up those huddles into smaller, more nimble groups, there were a couple of really neat things that happened. Even though it wasn't as consistent, we had planning being done specifically per the area, per the type of work, per the scope of work, according to the abilities of the superintendents. We also had lead men and women and foremen out there designated by functional area into these smaller, more nimble groups. By doing that, we were able to save time in the huddles, reduce the topics to just their area, and allow them to decide on, brainstorm about, and implement their plan A, B, C, D, E, and Fs based on what they needed to adapt to, instead of having one large project huddle, one large project meeting. Now, some people would criticize that, but I tell you, it really worked out well, and we started to gain some ground, and all of those areas were remarkably run, and then we synchronized communication through me, the lead superintendent, superintendent on a daily basis. That's one story. Here's another one where it didn't work out very well. There was an electrician one time on one of our projects that was just not doing well. And basically they were running the project as if it was just one single crew instead of segmented crews that were specific to their areas. Meaning they didn't parse out specific manpower, specific foremen to, hey, you go do the electrical rooms vertically up the building. You go work on the SES. You go work on lighting. You go work on power supply. You go work on, general in-wall roughing. They failed to break things into smaller, more nimble groups that could be consistent, that could learn, that could continuously improve. And instead they treated it as one big crew and would take groups of manpower here and there and move them all over the place, and there wasn't any consistency, and they started to really fall behind and get behind on commitments, and were always starting to fight fires. So the first solution that the team came up with was to get that trade partner to segment their forces with key foremen in different functional areas with trained workers that were used to that type of work, and to begin a chain of command and an enabling of the foreman to go do what they needed to do based on their strategic goals, and the project immediately started to recover. And so that electrician was not utilizing segmented forces, that was able to implement other options, plan A, B, C, D, E, or F, based on the needs and circumstances that they were in. Here's another one. Most people listening to this podcast have tried to implement self-perform, whether it's self-perform concrete or framing and drywall or electrical or whatever. And the issue is, if you don't have specialized crews and segmented forces, then you have deck people that are trained to do that, going to do walls, going to do footings, then going to do specialized stem walls, then going to do other types of work, then going to do general carpentry type work, then going to do logistics. And every time you switch, that gets them into a new learning phase, and they can never meet productivity. Some of the best concrete companies that we've ever seen will have segmented forces where they have deck superintendents and crews that do decks over and over and over, and they're nimble and adaptable, and they know the different formwork systems, and they know what they're doing. And then they'll have a wall foreman with wall crews, with wall workers that know what they're doing, that have consistency. They're able to be nimble and adapt and react, instead of running it to where all the workers and all the foremen do everything all the time. These crews are more specialized, they're segmented, and they're able to get better production. And so those are just a couple of the little stories or explanations that I wanted to share with you. It really is a principle that we need to segment our specialized forces so that they can be nimble and more adaptable. So here's the principle, and I'll just give you 3 different examples in my mind. So if you take a large project, like a $350 million project, that really needs to become 3 project teams, 3 teams of 9 or 10 or 12. You don't want to get more than 12. You can't treat the team as if it's just one large entity. There have to be points of contact, a PM and a superintendent, over specific portions of that project, and treat the 60, 80, 100, maybe $120 million portions of that mega project as interconnected groups that are connected through the entire whole through a communication system and an executive team. And that's how those projects are run geographically. So on let's say a big hospital, a big tower, you might have one team that's in control of the tower interiors, one team that's in charge of the podium interiors in the mechanical room, one team that's in charge of the exterior and the site. And you connect those teams through the executive team and through communication and through certain huddles and team meetings, but each of them run their project as a connected team, but they're able to be nimble and adapt, and they have their own foreman, and they have their own meetings, and they have their own command and control of geographical areas, and that's how it works. The other thing, in large companies, the same thing is true. We have to have departments or functional groups. I personally like the word functional groups or teams. We have to have these teams that can go segment, that can have really dynamic and multiplying leaders, that can run people meaning lead people and coach people in those teams and do a really good job and help accomplish the overall mission of the whole through a scaled system of alignment. The other thing is leading large companies. If an owner tries to always keep control, and when they expand and get bigger and bigger, they never create lower level or intermediate level leadership teams that have a certain amount of control and a certain amount of autonomy in their functional areas with an aligned, scaled, collaborative leadership structure. If they don't do that and you have leaders at the top trying to continuously and consistently control things and do lower level work and micromanage and do those things, then that organization is not going to be able to scale. And I think everybody would know the company that I'm talking about when I mention this is that there is a company that within 25 years, because they had smaller, more nimble business units and more autonomous project sites leaders and business units, they were able to go from a relatively new, or basically just a new company, to over a $7 billion a year in gross revenue company because they had smaller, more nimble units. And so we have to do that. We have to understand that the best teams and companies are given segmented units with really dynamic leaders. They're given a goal, and then they're able to work towards that goal and towards the aligned focus of the organization. And so we really need to have speed and adaptability within teams, within our groups. And we need to enable others to head that group, that team, towards the goal based on their circumstances, based on their resources, based on their training, and based on a certain level of autonomy, because they have to be nimble and adaptable forces and flexible organizations that are segmented and smaller as teams. Now, let me tell you a story from history. In 1800, Napoleon gained control of northern Italy, and they forced the Austrians to sign a treaty recognizing French territorial control there. For the next 5 years, there was kind of a semi-pseudo peace, kind of this frustrated peace. Then Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of France, and others, the other territories around, so Russia, England, Austria, they began to suspect that this upstart Napoleon had limitless ambitions. So Karl Marx, an Austrian quartermaster general and influential member of the military, proposed an offensive maneuver against France, and he said, in war, the object is to beat the enemy, not to just wait, not to just sit back and see what's going to happen and let them attack you. So he gained influence for his plan, and in 1805, Austria, England, and Russia signed a treaty of alliance and decided to wage war against France. That summer, they formulated their plan. 95,000 troops would attack the French in northern Italy. Another 23,000 would secure the road between Italy and Austria. Mark would then lead a force of 70,000 men west on the Danube in Bavaria, preventing them from becoming allies with France. Then, a 70,000-person army from Russia would link up and defeat the French west. Then England would attack the French at sea, and this army would total to about 5,000 men overall, the largest force that up to that point was ever assembled in Europe. Not even Napoleon could withstand that, they thought. In September, Mark would begin. He established his camp and began to instill order within the army. He instilled what was called clockwork warfare. He wanted everything in order, everything according to the plan. And with that one plan, he tried to think of all the different contingencies, meaning anything that would have to be done to make that one plan work. Everything was planned, and everyone was told to follow the plan. He thought his plan was perfect and that Napoleon was doomed. Mark was once captured, and he studied Napoleon's war strategy, so he thought he knew what Napoleon would do. And a key strategy that Napoleon would always employ, or so he thought, was to make the enemy divide his forces. But now they would all stay together and basically turn the tables on Napoleon. With trouble all around, Napoleon would have to divide. The chessboard was all set, and things were set to go to favor the Russians, the English, and the Austrians. Near the end of September, Mark sensed something was wrong, though. Suddenly, scouts started telling him forces were in unpredictable locations. The French were heading towards him through the Black Forest, so Mark dispatched troops to meet him. Turns out the French were also on the north, Different spies said different things. There was unsubstantiated information, and Mach did not know what to do. The French actually ended up in October east of Mach, cutting him off. He was trapped in a nightmare. French also began mobilizing into other locations, which pinned Mach's army into an impossible situation. Panicking, Mach sent probes everywhere. Mach found a small opening where he thought he could escape, and there was hope. But suddenly a report came back that the French were there as well and had mobilized overnight. Then he found out that the Russians were not coming. He was surrounded. And so, being surrounded, Mach surrendered, and it turned out to be one of the most bloodless battles in history. And then Napoleon turned east and dealt with the Russians, and Mach was put into prison. Napoleon had smaller, nimble, and autonomous units with leaders that were very much like Napoleon. They were able to think quickly, they were able to think on their feet, they were able to adapt, they were able to be nimble, they moved with packs on their backs, and they were able to outflank and outmaneuver this large single army, which was slow and tedious and cumbersome. Sun Tzu said you need to be in a position of potential force at all times. And when you're stagnant, and let's liken it to construction, when you have one huddle system, when you have this large project team organization without clusters or without smaller, more nimble units, when we have a single plan that somebody wants to hold to without adaptation, then you're not in a position of potential force and movement at all times where you can attack, and attack some more. Most wisdom in our industry says that we should stay together. We should huddle everything together. We should have large teams put together. We should keep the plan together. We should have one form of technology and force that technology on all of our systems and processes, even if they don't work. And this is not wisdom. This is not the way it should be. We need to give our units, our autonomous teams, our smaller, more nimble units, clear goals that align with the goals of the organization, and then let them accomplish those goals. This is so important. This is super important. This is better than petty control. And this one concept, not understood, is why large project teams fail. It's why softwares fail in large companies. It's why certain meetings fail. It's why companies can't take their next step. It's why CEOs fail. It's why people can't take that dynamic step to become a fast-learning organization that's able to outbeat their competitors because they don't get this one concept. It takes strength to let go a little, to give up a little control, and to allow for a little more chaos, but to decentralize that command. And the current condition on our industry is that people are too mechanical. They say to do one thing from start to finish. They only have one plan and they want to stick with it no matter what, even if it doesn't work. They don't adjust to new technologies. They move together in one solid group instead of segmenting their forces. They try and control everything. They want to use one technology for all solutions. And I might add, they don't want to decentralize control and lead their people and trust their people and let lower level leaders head that organization towards a common vision and be trusted. The solution for this is in your organization to identify key leaders that are aligned with you. It's a lean concept to develop leaders within that are aligned to the custom standards and culture of the organization, that believe in lean and operational control and all of the values that your corporation, your company, your group espouses, your department, whatever it is, your team. Identify the key leaders and make sure that teams are properly organized to be nimble and adaptable with the right communication structures, the right meeting structures, and the right command and control structures, right? Make sure you have smaller units that can adapt in limitless patterns and that you always have plan A, B, C, D, E, or F, but that's aligned to the overall group. Groups need to be fluid, fast, and adaptable, and we have to have the ability to choose between those predetermined plan A, B, C, D, or E, or F, and create new ones on the fly if necessary, because mobility is the greatest force that you can have. And this applies to almost every level of construction. And so the challenge that I would give you is to, read books like The 33 Strategies of War. There's also a really good book called Multipliers. I've talked about it before in previous podcasts, but you cannot be a diminisher leader. You have to be a multiplier leader. Diminisher leaders are the leaders that are always micromanaging and doing lower level work that will not trust their other leaders. They want control of the organization, and they're not willing to lead in a dynamic way that allows more people, more leaders, more groups to move forward that larger organization into the future at a more aggressive pace. And so the challenge here also would be, think about where you are not segmenting your forces and getting the proper leverage and the proper nimbleness and adaptability. I remember one owner complimenting us one time saying, "Your team was always nimble and adaptable, and it meant the world to us." And I've never forgotten that. So the focus for this, the vision for this, would be that on our project sites, we're able to vigorously and violently take advantage of options, that we're able to seize good ground, that we're able to go do dynamic and strategic things, that we're able to get ahead and prevent crash landings, that we're able to really do a good job and have some strategic thinking based on good options that are available to smaller teams, and that way we can run a more remarkable project. And if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, any feedback, you want to do a podcast with me, you want to do an interview, if you want another podcast topic, if you want to give me feedback, please email me at jason@elevateconstructionist.com or check us out on our website, www.elevateconstructionist.com. IST stands for Insights, Solutions, and Training. And so I think that you'll be really excited to go implement this, to think about how this applies to your project sites. Like I said, reach out if you have any questions. And I do want to quickly say before closing this, there's some cool things coming up. Our book is being fully edited. It's currently being recorded, Elevating Construction Superintendents. I know you're going to want to check that out and purchase that on the website and be ready for it when it comes out. At the latest, it comes out in January, but we're hoping to get it out much sooner. We will have other books in the future. We'll have other podcasts, and there's just some really cool things that are going to be coming out for field engineering. So until we meet again, I hope this has been helpful. I really hope it helps you in your role. And until then, on we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.